Paula Bennett.
Mr Chair, I stand up at this part with the title of the Vulnerable Children's Bill and just want to speak in response to a few of the things that have been raised. So this is the Vulnerable Children's Bill. This is for those children that are most vulnerable. This is for those that are most at risk of abuse and neglect and are already being abused and neglected. The point I did want to make in respect to that title and respect to this bill is that this legislation is actually one small part of the work that is going on in this area, that you don't actually have to legislate for everything that you do, and in so many ways it is the actions of those that are on the front line, it is the actions of those non-government organisations, the children's teams, the government departments and how they're working that is actually going to make the biggest difference. So legislation has a part to play, but actually legislation is not the only response to what we have to do for children. So the members have raised what they consider to be missing from this legislation. Actually, I think the work is going on. There is more work that constantly needs to be done, but it is not work that needed to be legislated. So, for example, no one denies that some of the causes around child abuse and neglect are around, in many cases, mental health issues for parents and families, ongoing alcohol and substance abuse issues, obviously domestic violence, long-term poverty, intergenerational welfare dependence, really I think a lack of, well not a lack, a real hopelessness that you see from many of those causes that have led to the symptoms now of being people feeling incredibly isolated, not part of a community, not part of a family or extended whānau, and as a result I think living in extreme dysfunction and chaos. We as the state have a role to step in and work for those children, and we do it well. We have amazing frontline social workers that are doing an outstanding job, but there's absolutely no doubt that we could do it better. What this work is about getting into the more preventative. So when members raise that this Vulnerable Children's Bill is not getting into the issues around family violence, it's not getting into the issues of what's happening in the home, I have to tell them they're simply incorrect, because that is exactly what your children's teams and the work that they are doing is doing. And that is where you see joint chief executives, of which this bill does do, having to have a plan for vulnerable children. If they are not addressing some of the causes and actually looking at preventing those very children from getting into those places where they are most unsafe, then they are not going to be doing their job. I have said that it will be, they will have to report transparently to Parliament on the progress that they are making to that plan. Already we are seeing in Rotorua and Whangarei real differences in having one plan for that child, for them having faster access to all of the government agencies to make sure we wrap the support around, whānau ora getting on board. Those vulnerable children, and it's why we called it this, is very much about them getting into that home. We have examples where they are working with the mum to get her drug and alcohol counselling, are working with dad to get him support for his issues that have led to domestic violence, are there for the long haul. They have one key lead that they know, that they trust, that they work with. We don't dictate who that is, so we don't say it's someone that works for government. It can be whānau ora, it can be iwi-led, it can be, but they all are connected through this children's team. So we have a group of real experts that are overseeing it, from paediatricians to psychologists to social workers, to those the experts in education, to across the board. So you actually do have those checks and balances that are testing back against the plan all of the time, and then also breaking down the barriers. So this legislation is important, and I'm not saying it's not, and there are things in here obviously that I think need to be done, but I don't want this House to think that this Vulnerable Children's Bill is by any means the work that is going on for these children. If you wanted me to put a percentage on it, this bill is about 25% of it. The other 75% of getting Vicky, the Vulnerable Kids Information System, the hub where we know all of the information is going, so that we can then make sure that those children that don't reach that threshold of child, youth and family getting response can actually get. I thank members for their contribution through this committee of the whole House. It has been helpful. It has raised, I think, some interesting debates, but as as I say, it is wider reaching than just this legislation. It's the work that happens on the ground that makes the biggest difference. Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank the Minister for her contribution.